Hello, I am Iribas Rudín. I work at the Faculty of Fine Arts at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid, and I'll talk here about a proposal of a project on color blindness at the Faculty of Fine Arts at the UCM. Here's the index to my presentation. Firstly, we'll talk about what color blindness is shortly, then about dischromatopsia in the field of art, especially painting, then about the fine arts university teaching to these colorblind students. Then I will introduce the project that I am talking about, its objectives, its methodology, the future research that I envisage for the project, and lastly, a few references. So, what is color blindness? Its scientific name is Dyschromatopsia. Dyschromatopsia. To the right, you can see an electronic microscope image of the cones, and behind them, a line of rods. So, dyschromatopsia is an anomaly in color vision, and it consists in a partial or a total deficiency of one of the three types of cones existing, which are the color-sensitive receptors in the retina. So one type of cone is especially sensitive to what is called blue light. It's a wider spectrum than specifically blue, of course. Another to green light, again a wider spectrum, and another to red light. This is just to simplify. That's why they are symbolized like this, although obviously they don't have any color. And here we see the cone sensitivity to light on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis the wavelength of the visible spectrum. So each cone covers a different width of, phenomenologically speaking, colors, but of course they are radiations, electromagnetic radiations, which is what light is. So when the deficiency of one of these specific type of cones is severe, then it is very, very noticeable, because the result is a significant alteration in color perception in comparison to people with a normal vision. Regarding color, here we have the same scheme at the bottom, just to better understand what's going to follow. So protanopia is the first type of color deficiency and its alterations. In this case, protanopes have a deficient, so as to say, red cones, the ones to the right. In deuteranopia, the faulty cones are in the middle. They are the green ones, so as to say again. And tritanopia, which is the least frequent form of dyschromatopsia, has the problem in the blue cones. And here in this scheme we can see, to the left we see the ordinary image, so normal for normal vision with a wide range of colors. The next image here is deuteranopia, where the faulty cones are the greens, and we see that areas that have been are red and green in the original image lose their saturation and lose even their identifiable tonality, so they get very much confused. And a very similar result is the protanopia, where the red cones are missing, although there is a slight difference if we compare both of these images, and it's that red tones in the original image have lost a lot of luminosity as well. It's not only a tonal loss, we're talking about a light loss as well. And that's easy to understand, because the red cones go further into the spectrum, and if we miss them, if we don't have them, we don't get the red light. We can't feel it, we can't see it, we can't sense it. So that's the main difference between those two, although there's more, like this area corresponding to red is much less saturated than in deuteranopes. So in deuteranopes, the reddish color is warmer than in protonopes, as you can see as well. And lastly, this very candy-like image corresponds to the very infrequent, very, very rare phenomenology of tritonopia, where cyans, emeralds, reds and magentas dominate the scene, and yellow is totally absent. So here we see the written abstract of these differences. And we can have a visual simulation of a much simpler scene, such as this natural one, with some reddish tones and some greenish, and see, for example, one of the two typical types of red-green confusion, which is protonopia and deuteranopia. We choose deuteranopia, although they're not so different. So here we see, it seems very much like a summer landscape where our grass, our usually green grass, has been scorched by the sun, and the very exotic tritonopic phenomenology would look somewhat like this. So the occurrence of dischromatopsia in the population, it's pretty high in males actually. It's an 8%. Of course, we're talking about stronger and milder forms here, and only 0.5% in females. The condition is mostly congenital, very rarely acquired, and in its milder forms, which are not called anopia but anomaly, the alterations in color vision are not so evident and may go unnoticed, undiagnosed, even for fine arts students. And I'm talking from experience. I'm speaking from experience here. So, dischromatopsia in the field of art. Actually, there are no world-renowned painters known to have had this condition. Dyschromatoptic artists may opt for disciplines in art where color is secondary in importance, for example, sculpture, drawing, etching, and so on. When painting, they often choose to work in grayscale, or maybe grayscale and one tonality, or in any case with a restricted palette. Despite this, the visual results of their special color phenomenology is in a contemporary sensitivity, original and visually interesting to the public. School teachers certainly are advised not to discourage artistic pursuits in dyschromatopsic children. And the occurrence of dyschromatopsia among art students in various studies has shown that it equals the percentage in the general population. So it doesn't seem to have deterred people from studying art at all. Now, specifically to the Fine Arts University teaching to colorblind students, this is one of my teaching classes at the Faculty of Fine Arts, and at the end, when a few students remain. And we can say that in the university teaching of the fine arts, it is certainly an unescapable task to address the issues raised in the teaching and learning when the student is colorblind. If we aspire to become an inclusive institution, and I am certain the Complutense University does, we must take this group of persons into account. Painting becomes especially problematic because of the special perception, understanding, and usage of color in dyschromatopsic students. So now to my own project in this respect. It's called How Do We See Colorblindness? And the subtitle is Dyschromatopsia in the Faculty of Fine Arts, UCM, Associated Problems and Good Teaching Practices in the Painting Courses of the Degree in Fine Arts. It is an interdepartmental educational innovation project to be carried out in the Faculty of Fine Arts at the Complutense. The duration will be 2 academic years, that is, the next year to start in a few months and the year thereafter, ending in 2024. Here I will discuss the first year. The objectives. The main goal of this project is to improve the communication between painting teachers and their dischromatopsic students at the Faculty of Fine Arts, facilitating a better teaching and learning process, making it more fluid, engaging, and rewarding for both sides. Of course, there are specific objectives. To gather resources about diversity in university, painting by dischromatoptic artists, teaching adaptations to these persons, and so on. To identify the previous knowledge about dischromatopsia among students and teachers at my faculty. To register the occurrence of dischromatopsia among students at this institution. To identify the students with this condition and invite them to join the project. Although I already have 3 students that are on the panel. To diagnose these students in the laboratory. To obtain pictorial and written records. That is, they will be working on still life paintings, and they will reflect on the process of execution. More specific objectives are to obtain in-depth information about the fundamental aspects of the problems encountered by these dischromatopsic students in the painting subjects of the degree in Fine Arts at the UCM. To show an example of a dischromatopsic professional artist who will discuss his or her mode of seeing and painting, or else to make an open discussion with project group members before the public. And lastly, to make a report that will include the main problems that dischromatopsic students have to deal with when studying painting subjects in the degree in Fine Arts, UCM. About the methodology. This is very important to me, phenomenological respect. So far from expecting the dischromatopsic students to fake what they are not, using various tricks such as apps, specially designed for dischromatopsic people, and the names of the colors on the tubes, they will be encouraged to paint as they see, in congruence with their personal mode of color perception. So, in an attitude of profound phenomenological respect. Okay, so the project will make use of mostly qualitative methodologies, although it will take in objective data, such as test results, and they will be combined with subjective data, which are the most, for example, interviews. It will be interdisciplinary. We have members from the areas of fine arts, vision science, and statistics. Also, teachers, student and administrative staff will participate in the project, and the focus of the first year of it will be on the students with dischromatopsia. So this is the first chapter, and the first chapter is absolutely centered in the students' experience and problems. About the timeline of the project, we have a first phase of data collection where we gather printed matter and other resources to delve on the topic. Then a phase where we make up the drafts. We draft the survey and the discussion group and the questions that are going to be dealt with. And this phase involves the initial dischromatopsic students, these 3 people, and a specialist in statistics, of course, myself. The next phase is the survey, which is going to be an online administered survey and directed to students and teachers at the Faculty of Fine Arts. Then the possible dischromatopsic students will be tested in the Laboratory of Optics and Optometry at the UCM and diagnosed, of course. So this is the lab test phase. This is followed by individual interviews with the diagnosed students one-to-one. The next phase is the discussion group, where the participating students will discuss in-depth issues together. Then, although this begins before in the timeline, the painting practice, which is the production of the still life paintings we've talked about from specifically intended models that I will set up. Then also to write the reflections about the process. This is also an important phase of the work. And one of the last events is public, and it's either a guest lecture by a dischromatopsic professional artist or an open discussion among the group members. This depends on how much money we get. And lastly, we'll make up a report with the first year findings. About the future research, there will certainly, I hope, be a second year of the project, and it will be carried out in the next academic year after the first. It will add a focus on the other side. Although still working with the students, it will add the new vision, which is the problems encountered by the university educators in their teaching of painting with these students. The study will culminate in the elaboration of a handbook of good practices destined for this teaching staff. Lastly, I have a few references. You can stop the presentation if you want more detail. I dealt with this problem in the past, in the last year, when drafting up the idea. And lastly, here are my contact data. Thank you very, very much for your attention.